Mhm. Good evening, Paul, Dr. Paul Ivy. How are you this evening, man? It's good to see you
Ah,
again.
good evening, Leo. I'm doing well, and it's good to be here with you again.
Oh my, it's been 1 week. It seemed like 2 weeks. It's like it can't come early enough. The Tuesday evenings. Can't,
Yes, indeed. That is so true.
just want to, almost want chat, 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 chat. It's
And there's so much relevant stuff to talk about.
so much, so much. I posted a thing on Bob Marley today, and people cussed me off. But it was about I said on Facebook that I don't I don't believe that we should have too much to discuss if the Marleys chose to spend their money or get investors to spend their money on the movie and choose whomever they want to. They can choose whomever they want. It's their money, is their invested money that they're putting in there. If it were public money, if they were taking tax dollars, then we have everything to say. But when a person buy them home or their car, you can't tell them not to buy a home or car. You can't tell them what color car to buy or what type of
Tell
car
them
to
not
buy.
to buy a Lamborghini if they
Yeah,
want.
if they want to buy a Lamborghini, they buy a Lamborghini, right?
Yes.
So that's
We Jamaicans not easy. We ups into celebrities' business. That's why
no.
celebrity had told them, at one time somebody said, "Yeah, leave rich people business."
Exactly. That's a good way. That's a good one. Leave rich people business. That's good.
Mhm.
Paul, today, before we get into topic,
Yeah.
today someone sent me something on my desk and I said, oh my God, I have not heard this poem in such a long time. Once I started, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's by Claude McKay, and I wanna share it with you
We must die.
because eh?
If we must die,
Yes, yes, if we must die. How you know? It said, if we must die, let it not be like hogs, hunted and penned in an inglorious spot, while around us bark the mad dog and hunger dog, as a mad and hunger dog, right? Making their mock at our accursed lot. If we must die, oh, let us nobly die, so that our precious blood may not be shed in vain. Then even the monsters we defy shall be constrained to honor us, though dead. O kinsmen, we must meet the common foe. Though far outnumbered, let us show us brave. And for their 1,000 blows, deal one death blow. What though before us lies the open grave? Like men, we'll face the murderous, cowardly pack, pressed to the wall, dying, but fighting back. I thought that was a good enslavement piece we spoke a little bit about last week, but I think that it's perfect for this week to start off this week's conversation. What do you
well,
think?
it speaks to the power of the word. It
Yes.
speaks to the power of ideas, and it also underscores something similar to what Sam Sharp said.
Yes.
I would
Yes.
rather die on yonder gallows than live in slavery.
Absolutely. Absolutely right.
And it speaks also to the power that people need to recognize that we have. I've often alluded to it, people power, that
Mhm.
in a democracy, the people needs to appreciate that they are the rulers, and if needs be, they are willing to stand up for their convictions.
Something, somebody said that to me yesterday, and they said, do people really have power anyway, other than one time every 4 years or 5 years? Do they really have power? So
Yes,
let's
they
talk about that.
do. And we
Mm.
have several examples of it that has occurred. There are several examples. What we are not doing is that we are not recognizing and celebrating the small wins. It started with PJ Patterson in the gas riots. When the gas riots occurred in 1996, I believe, PJ Patterson got scared. And he actually said when he was backing down, what we are seeing is the emergence of a new Jamaicans, who assertive, a more assertive Jamaican, and so forth. Look at these local government elections that are coming around now. Persons are beginning to focus on the local authorities, the municipal.
It never happened like this before, has it?
Exactly. The
It start feel
municipal
like it's a,
corporations are now
yeah,
in the crosshairs.
me start looking upon it and say, whoa, a general election coming up? What? You know, it
Perhaps
looks,
because they were delayed for so long and so on, and they are now, it has now taken on the characteristics of a referendum of sorts on the
right,
governing party, and also to test the strength of the
of the
opposition.
opposition.
But the larger point I'm making is that, yes, the people of the power, people have always had the power. And we have seen instances. You remember Dr. Peter Phillips wanted to introduce a tax on bank withdrawals. And person said, no,
I
we're going
remember
to
that.
none of it. It had to be removed.
It was during the Portia
minister,
Simpson's era,
yes,
right? Yes, I remember that.
Prime Minister tried to appoint the Chief Justice in an acting position, and people said no. In fact, the judges went on strike. They actually all gathered in Kingston, say they were all there for a meeting, and he had to back down. So there are examples of it.
Well, I think that people are not looking at those small wins.
And that's the point.
Because they're looking, you know, when people say have the power, they're thinking to move people out of office rather than make changes that are important to your daily lives.
Demand changes, demand particular changes, and to insist on them happening. When you talk about moving people out of office, they also do have that power, but it is probably every 5 years. Because theoretically, elections are regarded as sanctioning devices.
Right,
That's
absolutely.
what elections are in the literature. Sanctioning devices, and persons have the ability to exercise that right. But it is to be appreciated by the people when they're talking about voting every 5 years. Voting is only one of the ways to assert one's citizenship.
Yes, I agree with that. I agree with that. I totally agree with that. I totally agree with this celebrating the small wins and acknowledging the power of the people through those small wins, because it's the way that you know, if the ministers or the MPs or the councilmen not responding to the people, they rise up.
Yes, and you know, we mustn't fall into the cynicism to say that, you know, that is buying into the drinking the Kool-Aid, to say that persons do not have power, citizens are powerless. That's what the politicians want to hear.
Believe, yes,
there was a group of farmers in St. Thomas. I think I've cited this example already. They were about to be pushed off of the sugar lands, the lands that were previously in sugarcane. And they said no, and they organized themselves. They got assistance from JFJ, Jamaicans for Justice. They got assistance from the National Integrity Action. And the leader of the group said, I channeled the spirit of Paul Bogle. And they got leases, long-term leases, and they are now on the land that they were about to be pushed off because they asserted themselves. That's another win.
There's something to be said, though, about the other side, of the coin, where, for example, I saw recently, I think the opposition does a pretty good job in Jamaica of voicing their concerns, right? And I saw recently where the role of the ombudsman is now under the electoral commission, right, something like that, right? And so what was kind of different about this, because generally you see two sides battling you know, a bill, and then they go to a vote. It seemed like the bill came through and just passed. I mean, I saw one discussion from the president of the People's National Party, and then the next day the bill had passed. It was that quick.
Well, yes, you see, the government has this habit of taking bills to parliament with short notice. It did so with the extension of the retirement age for the DPP and the Auditor General. Brought the bill
I
to
see.
parliament on very short notice for debate and passage because they have the majority. And so that's also what happened in the case of the Ombudsman Interim Act, where they wanted to embed it into the Electoral Commission of Jamaica,
Right.
notwithstanding the opposition from different quarters, not just the parliamentary opposition, but civil society groups and others has expressed concerns about doing that. Even government backbencher Carl Samuda. Interesting. Yes,
okay.
he opposed it as well. As a matter
So
of
it was because generally when a bill goes into play, what happens is they dissect it and they say, okay, this piece is not necessarily good for the country. This people is not good, or this piece is good. Let's agree on this piece. Let's disagree on this piece. That kind of thing. But I didn't see much of that at all.
First reading and
yes,
all of those type of things.
I didn't see that in that bill.
What we are seeing is the steamrolling approach that this government has taken in more than one occasion as it relates to passage of laws.
But then the people are not represented here, and this is the reason I brought that up is the representation that I'm talking about now. How do you think? Do you think that they have the? Do you think that they're representing the people by that? The steamrolling is what you call it, the steamrolling approach.
Absolutely not. And what we are seeing is also the dysfunctionality of the parliament. Because what you do not have are the people's representatives speaking on their behalf. The MP for the constituency where I reside, that MP never stood up in the parliament and made a contribution to the bill. You didn't hear any other MP got up and to voice any position contrary to the government. So what we have are party-centric representatives. They're not people-centric representatives.
So is that because they have the advantage of majority and overlaid majority?
No, it is the history of how the parliament has functioned, not just in this dispensation, but we really do not have true representatives of the people. The MPs are obligated to their parties, and they do not represent the people's interests.
That's what I'm
one of the things that we need to change as we grow and develop as a democracy, where we have true representatives who will, if the situation requires it, or if the situation justifies it, will go against their party. There was one instance in the parliament where Portia Simpson Miller, she was then Minister of Labor and Social Security, I think, or one of those ministries. And the fire service was not being handled well. And she opposed her party. And I was telling you that it is from that point that I think this disunity that you're seeing in the PNP actually started. Because afterwards, 2 members of her party, one, it is alleged, told her an expletive, and another one, I think it was Jensek at the time, pointed up in her face, how dare you, how dare you. So we do not have a history, a tradition of the representatives representing those who sent them to parliament.
All right, and here's something that happened in the past couple of days that that I'm curious of, because I saw one party leader said, "Oh, we are going to, as part of, once we win, we are going to increase the threshold for taxes, $2 million, and once it's $3 million, and so forth." And I wonder, because I saw that in 2020 also, where the threshold was increased to 1.5 million. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh yes, oh
It kind of
yes.
struck me because it sounded like the government is using a strategy, politicizing a strategy to winning an election. I don't know. It just never sound right to me. I don't know if it's possible that you can politicize an action like that, using increase threshold to gain vote. To me, that sound kind of funky. I mean, I don't know if it's right, but I heard the first one that came out last week was the PNP said they wanted to do that. It seemed like I don't know if that were okay, but then I see there's a comeback from the other party, the JLP, that says, yeah, we're gonna do it for 2 million. And it just seemed like we're using, both parties using something that is sacred to the people, as a political tool to get into office. I may be wrong. Let me ask.
It's part of the cynicism and the cynical approach that our politicians have taken to governance, where they don't respect the people, and come election time, they will drop a load of marl here, they will pave a road there, they will hand out fertilizers there, and all of these type of things. It's not good. I don't want to use a bad word on this platform.
The thing is, it just doesn't sound like it's a well thought out plan. Now, if you're going to increase a threshold, it implies that you're going to lose tax dollars for the country. It means that you're not going to be, you're going to pass on those tax dollars to the system, which is fine. But the implication of you saying we don't have any money, but then you're giving it away like that, to use as a tool.
An election ploy.
That's why I don't understand.
Election ploy, but you see, it's not necessarily a bad thing.
Okay, that's what I want to know.
It's not a bad thing to raise the threshold, because inflation has severely reduced the purchasing power of persons over the last 3-4 years or so. So that is warranted, but it is the context in which it is being done and the manner in which it is being done.
That's what I'm talking about.
That is the issue. It's not a bad thing.
All right,
because government don't have any right to people's money, that I was thinking this morning that one of the worst things that can happen is really income tax. I'm for consumption tax. I'm more
of course
than income tax.
Yes.
But it is the context and the manner in which it is being done. It is brazen and it is just outrageous, just in terms of the manner in which it is being done. And as if to say, persons are not thinking people. We can't see a samphire when it is being done. It's like it can't, like we can't see through it.
Doesn't matter.
It seems to me that in 2024, to have our politicians operating from the old playbook of gimmicks is an insult to the electorate, or at least to me, speaking for myself. You tell me that you're going to run around with a bag of promises. I'm going to make Clarkstown a city or an urban center or some type of other things like that, just because you're.
But that's what I'm saying. I love the idea of a city. It's just that it's election time, and so it seemed like it's a little game that's being played, and I like that. But you're
going to a parish and you're not saying that you're going to make the capital. You're not going to make it the capital of the parish. It's Falmouth.
That's right. Okay. So Falmouth is not a city.
or whatever it is. If you're going to grade somewhere in a parish, you're not going to start with the capital.
Oh, that's true. Okay, I see what you mean. Okay, I got you. Never even thought about that.
So this goodies, this promises of goodies as the means of trying to attract votes is really quite off-putting. It's really quite, tell us your policies, significant policies. Here we are, when the budget debate, as it is called, was read out, and also the Governor General did the throne speech at the beginning of the financial year just coming to an end now, where were all those things that were set out there? Are those the things that they are talking about that they had implemented, or is just a whole bag of new things they're coming as if they're Santa Claus?
Oh, yes. Oh my, it sounds kind of awkward coming at election time, I must tell you. But
And moreover, we're talking about a local government election.
oh,
And
that's
the
true.
local issues are not
Are not
the
even
local
addressed,
issues
right?
are not dominating.
So
I
let me
would
ask
like
you.
to see the candidates in their 228 divisions in
Right?
in terms of
So
council.
we want to see what those councilmen are saying again. So what are their plans for their
About each saying in relation to their plans for the local area in which they are running.
but you know, Paul, Paul, you know, election has always been a bandwagonist type thing in Jamaica, though. People don't really care about the issues, do they? They just go on the bandwagon and make the numbers bigger each time, right?
They're kind of festive, you know, festival and rary and hype and that type of thing. But we are kind of growing, you know. There's a segment of the population that's focusing on issues, you know, which I'm happy to see.
But which segment is that? Which segment is that? I want to know about that. Tell me, because the thing is, I am more interested in highlighting the issues than seeing a bunch of people dancing and winding up and thing campaign. You know, so if there's such an organization, and that organization should be the organization that putting pressure on the government, because then they are intellectuals, they're academics, and can make sense out of what's going on. So tell me, man. I mean, I know the national integrity.
What did Because Gil call them? Because Gil had mentioned the chatter in class and they had called them a particular term. It's eluding me now. But what I'm saying is that we're seeing in the US, they like to talk about, you know, college educated suburban moms or soccer moms. Or
soccer moms, yes.
No, I'm saying that in Jamaica over the last couple of decades or so, there's been a set of tertiary graduates in the middle there, college, university educated, and these are people who are thinking about the issues. It is not the curry goat and the beer drink and the t-shirt wrap up with $5,000 or whatever the figure might be. There's a set of persons who are talking about the issues. You hear them come on the talk shows. You know, a set was being interviewed by Dion Jackson Miller the other evening and so forth, and they were very articulate setting out the issues. In fact, in the book that I'm writing about the municipal corporations, one of the points that I made has to do with the profile of the candidates and their education level. And I had to eat a little bit of crow, because when I looked at some of the candidates and their profile that came out in the newspapers recently, I'm beginning to be pleased with the profile of some of the candidates that are coming out. We have people there with master's degrees. We have people who are teachers and professionals. It's not like back in the day when you have those counselors who can't put two sentences together. So I'm saying that we're seeing a shift. I am seeing the beginnings of a shift in the profile of the persons who are coming out at the local level. And
it's so required.
Yes, so there is the beginning. It's like you're seeing a little light at the end of the tunnel. There's a light at the end of the tunnel where there are indeed some issues voters, Leo.
Okay, yeah. I'm happy to hear that. You know, across the board, I want to see the elevation, because sometimes, boy, you see some things happening. You know, in policing in America, they said there are two different sets of officers. One, the ones who leave high school and just go inside to the police department and they become, you know, higher rank police officers. But from the day they went in the first year, that they have a TO, a training officer. The training officer actually inculcate everything that they need to know inside of their brain, and they take that right throughout the life of their employment. but then there's another set of police officers now, the newcomers, who are they went to college, 2 and 4 year degrees.
Right. For the community college,
all
yes.
right, so the difference that they're seeing nowadays is that the ones who came into at the high school level are more likely to commit misconduct than the ones who came out of college. So they have to train the ones who are coming out of high school in what is called something justice. I forgot what it's called. But then the ones who went to college already developed relationships. They understand how to deal with people. They understand that they've been on campuses, and they build networks and understand how to get the best out of people and so forth and so on.
Yes.
While the ones that in high school, all they know is punch and beat, and what I mean. And so the difference here is what you're showing me, that we're moving now from those 19-year-olds who didn't know much about post-high school stuff versus the persons who went to college, did their masters, and those are coming up, and they'll have a little better understanding to put more pressure on their MPs, because they're MPs now. I think I like that better.
We're seeing an emergence of that. And it is also happening in the JCF as well. The police force is seeing some better educated recruits than in the past. In fact, it is because of these new intelligent persons in the force, while they're beginning to crack some of these crimes. So the police officers in their forensic and telecommunication unit and so forth, these are brilliant guys. These are bright people, and they're in the force, and we're beginning to see a difference in the investigative capabilities and the ability to, extract data from a cell phone and so on and so forth. So we're seeing an emergence of that.
Well, I'll tell you this, that the police departments here they have their well-prepared brethren. Them have them own technology department, them own law department, all this, and so they're all integrated, and trust me, there are so many different type of strategies that can be used, and they apply them, man. COP, POP, EDS, all of these, they apply them in whichever situation. It's really, really nice to see. But crime still occur. But the thing is, without them, the crime would have been much higher,
And when the crime occurs, they're cleared up. They're cleared up. So I remember now Pickersgill's statement. The people, the articulate minority. The articulate minority, he said.
I like that. I like that.
That articulate minority, they punch above their weight. They punch above their weight because of how they use the different platforms. They use social media, they use the talk shows, they write letters to the media, and so on and so forth. So, and it's growing. It's a growing cadre, a growing segment of the population.
Very nice to hear. I think we set up for a discussion that we didn't get into this week yet. And I know that you came prepared for us to talk about reparation, right? Yeah. I know you came prepared to talk about whether Jamaica should be repaid for for all the crimes against the people who lived back in the 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th century, who were having trouble because of enslavement, the Middle Passage, the underdevelopment of Jamaica by British government, and the overproduction of agricultural products to be shipped but the overproduction through an overworked population to provide export to Britain. All of those things made Britain a wealthy, healthy economy. And I saw earlier this week there was some kind of numbers that, which is why I asked you. There were some billions and trillions of dollars that they say that that Britain owes Jamaica. And so I just need your thought. Tell me about reparation. What is reparation? Is it giving us back cash? Is it giving us in-kind support? How much them owe us? All of them good things. I'll leave that up to you right now.
Okay, how I think we should frame this, and this is where I want to start.
Okay.
Lawyers, in terms of lawyering, as I understand it, they apply the law to facts.
Okay.
So I think we should lay down some of the facts first.
Okay.
The approach that I think we should take. Let us make the case. And in terms of making the case, I want to do a little plug. I want to plug my book.
Okay.
To indicate
it's your show.
I have taken the time to write this book called The Compelling Case for Reparations for Chattel Slavery and Overdue Debt, 400 pages. What I have done is that I've gone and I've spent the time to put the evidence together. So I have collected the evidence from multiple sources to make the case that reparations is a legal and a moral issue, and that the demand for reparations is a just one, and that it can be supported on the basis of the facts.
Do you have the dollars to support it? I mean, do you have?
We are going to get to the dollars.
Good.
What is the crime that we're talking about for which reparations are due? It's chattel slavery. And this chattel slavery was the evil spawn from colonization. And this was based upon the perverse ideology of white supremacy. That's basically what was driving it, where that a set of people could look at another set of people as inferior and regard them as property to be owned and to be used, just like how you had horses and donkeys and other property. That's how persons were used. So what we're talking about here is essentially human trafficking. Chattel slavery was about human trafficking, where Europeans went into Africa. And in the case of Jamaica, let's narrow it down to Britain. Over 12 million Africans were taken out during the transatlantic slave trade. Not only did they take the people, but they stole artifacts, artwork, and other valuables and took them to Europe. Total exploitation, dehumanization, brutality of the people, rape, beatings, torture, starvation, forced labor, murder, genocide, terrorism, cultural decimation, and benefiting from the proceeds of the crime of slavery. One of the things that I've said is that I don't think many persons look into deeply the horrors of enslavement, the absolute terror and terrorism that it was.
I do think that people just say it, but they don't understand what the horror was.
They don't understand some of the things that actually took place.
Yes.
The plantations that we talk about, and some of these so-called estates that now exist. They were actually torture sites, That's how I look at them, They were actually sites of torture and just absolute brutalization. Let us talk about this fellow, Thomas Thistlewood. Thomas Thistlewood owned a property in Westmoreland. And one of the good things, quote unquote, that Thistlewood did was that he kept a diary. And he had over 10,000 pages of his diary that he recorded all of the atrocities that he committed, whether it was punishing the enslaved Africans that he owned or his sexual exploitation of the females. In Thistlewood's diary, which is recorded, Thistlewood diaries are now in the UK at the Lincolnshire Archives. That's where the diaries are. But Professor Douglas Hall wrote a book called In Miserable Slavery, Thistlewood in Jamaica. And in that book, he had extracted things from the diaries of Thistlewood. Thistlewood documented, for example, 3,852 acts of sexual activity with 136 enslaved women for his 37 years that he was in Jamaica. That is on the sexual exploitation side. 3,852 sexual acts with over 100 women. Then now on the side of the punishment and the brutalization of people. Here's an excerpt that he put in his diary, talking about punishing a slave. I gave him a moderate whipping, pickled him well, and made Hector, I'm using the word, defecate in his mouth. That's not what Thistlewood wrote, but I'm using that word since we're on this platform. So he said that he made another enslaved defecate in his mouth, and then he put a gag on it and made him wear it for 4 to 5 hours. That's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what Thistlewood did here in Jamaica. And when we talk about this other enslaved African called Aluda Equiano. Equiano is the first formerly enslaved person who wrote an autobiography. And in his autobiography, he laid out all of what happened to him. He said that when he was kidnapped and was tossed in the ship, he said to himself that he has now gone into the world of bad spirits. Let us shift over to Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass's book called The Narratives of Frederick Douglass, in which he laid out all of the horrors that he experienced. And then we come to Harriet Jacobs, The Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl, where she recounted all of the various horrors that she experienced. She said, for example, that her mistress, as they call them, she would go to church on a Sunday. And when she returned, if the Sunday meal wasn't ready, she would make one big fuss. And after she made the fuss and they shared out the food, she would go into the kitchen and she would spit in every pot in terms of what was left in the pot. She would spit in every pot so that the enslaved persons would not have anything to eat or would have to eat what she spat in and all of those type of things and so forth. So when we talk, and then now, let us just mention the tools of torture. There were particular tools that were designed to torture the enslaved people. You had a thing that they call the thumb screw, that they would use to screw into the thumb and so forth. Then you had the shackles, the various shackles and so forth, and the stress positions into which they would put them. Harriet Jacobs, in her book, she described a whipping that she experienced. I mean, listening to a man being whipped. And she described it in detail in her book and so on. It would make your skin crawl. So these are the kinds of things we're talking about in terms of how people were treated.
Did you pull up anything about the actual journey passage Africa to did you have any illustrations about what they went through as project pieces of material coming across? Yeah.
We have seen how they were stacked in there. We have seen images of how they were stacked in there and so forth. And one of the passages that I read was how persons would jump overboard just to escape the horrors that they were experiencing and the horrors unknown. There was this young man, I think his name was John Ryland. He was the son of an enslaver, and he was on one of the ships. And when he saw what was actually happening and it was starting to affect him, the captain took him one side and wanted to indoctrinate him that these are not really people. Right. These are just cargo. This is property that is to be used to make your father wealthy and so on and so forth. and John Ryland had an attack of conscience. He couldn't bear to see it. So when we lay out the background to this thing in terms of what has happened, so we talk about the crime. Then we now come to who are the criminals. The criminals are the European governments, the slave traders, the slave holders, and the insurance companies. There is this Lloyd's of London, for example. It came out some time back and made a kind of apology, but did not put its money, and I think it put up about $100 million to say, well, then, you know, that is for a fund to make amends and so forth. So we had the insurance companies, and we had these big banks that were providing the financing. So it was an industry. These are the perpetrators of the crime.
So the banks would finance the journey, the trip from London into Africa to the Caribbean and
yes, the triangular trade.
And then they would also know that once the money comes back, then the money gets deposited in those banks.
In those banks, and the insurance companies provided the cover for the cargo. That is why in the Zong massacre, when they massacred the people so that they could make the insurance claims, that was the insurance company was as part of the whole thing. It was an old industry.
Yes.
British for 183 years, when Britain wrested Jamaica from the Spanish, from 1655 to 1838, a period of 183 years, Britain controlled Jamaica, extracted sugar to go to Europe.
Banana, orange, everything, all of those things.
All the agricultural produce, everything was just being shipped out as raw material. That's why our agriculture is still largely based on shipping out of raw materials, you know.
Yes.
Because there was no local development taking place. It was just a source of material for the mother country, as it was called at the time. And so that's the Industrial Revolution, and Britain's development was built.
Okay, I think we need to make
enslaved Africans.
I think we need to make people understand what they mean by raw material. Right? When a bunch of banana gets shipped out as raw material, it's really for nothing. It's just a part of an end product. So when we don't sell it as the end product, we sell it as a piece of material that will fit into
raw material that is going to go into a process.
A process.
To produce finished product at the end where value added. Value is added, and they're actually, in some instances, exported back to us to purchase.
Back to us, right? Yeah. And the thing is, if we call it finished product, it would cost more because it would have labor and overhead in it and everything. But here is just material cost. No matter how much hours you put into making a banana tree grow and bear, it's just
another part of the exploitation that persons do not appreciate, you know, is the knowledge that has been stolen. Knowledge has been stolen. This matter of immunization, they actually got the knowledge from an enslaved African in the US, you know, called I'm not sure if I'm getting the pronunciation right. I think it's Wanismus, but I'll get the pronunciation. But he was
what is it about?
Inoculating people against smallpox.
Yes, smallpox.
In the Boston area of the United States, it was actually an enslaved African. Now listen to this. This enslaved African was given to the pastor as a gift by his congregation.
And he still
gave the pastor a gift of an enslaved African. And he was the one who showed them that back in Africa, they used to use the pus from an infected patient, dilute it, and infect other persons so that they can develop resistance. And big pharmaceutical companies in the US who eventually started to make vaccines and matters to do with immunization. That's where the knowledge came from. So there was a whole set, you know, people have this argument that slaves were taken from Africa. No, skills tradesmen were taken, skilled artisans and so on and so forth were taken. So the point of it all is that when you have these centuries of exploitation, unpaid labor, benefits accruing to the enslavers, and their descendants, present day descendants. People will make the argument that, oh, all of the enslavers are dead, but their descendants are benefiting from the inheritance.
Okay, so what makes reparation possible? Why should Britain pay us back?
Okay, they should pay us back because in law, criminals are not allowed to benefit from the proceeds of their crime. That is a principle
But
in
there
law.
wasn't any crime. But there wasn't any crime being committed then. It was law.
It was an immoral law. It was an immoral law. And precedent exists for reparations to be paid for persons who have been harmed. And what we're talking about is that persons, the case is clear that persons have been harmed. And so those laws cannot really stand if they are on immoral foundations. It was an immoral law. A human being cannot be property.
Well, yeah, I understand that, but I'm trying to get you to help us with from your perspective.
Yes.
Is slavery was in fact a law, which means what caused slavery to end? Was it because it was an immoral law, or was it because there was a fight against the whole business of slavery because people felt wronged? And I mean, what makes it necessary for us then to turn for the time to turn back and they have to repair the damage that they did? I want to know.
Well, the damage that was done is clear.
Right.
The damage is clear that was done. The slave enterprise, the slavery enterprise was beginning to be uneconomical. And the number of rebellions that they began to face, they could not keep up with those rebellions any further. Because the enslaved had enough, and they were not going to countenance that type of denigration anymore.
Well, I'm saying to you, right, like today, right, if a wrong has been done, a moral wrong has been done, you can take the person to court, to civil court, and you get money back, right? This is pretty much the same thing. If we already prove that there was an immoral wrong done, why hasn't been any reparations made for that wrong? Why wasn't it necessary for us to take people to court, take the entire Britain system to court to get the money back? Why?
Actually, we probably are not there yet, but we may eventually get there, because the momentum has been building as it relates to the demand for reparations. We have, for example, the CARICOM Reparations Commission, and they have national reparations committees in each of the different territories. And what we see is that we have, for example, the CARICOM 10-point plan for reparations. So the argument and the idea for reparation is building. What is to be appreciated, at emancipation, the enslavers were compensated for loss of their property. Loss of their property.
Something happened there, right? I remember that at emancipation, they were getting paid for all the losses that they incurred.
They got 20 million pounds.
Yes.
Plus 4 more years of apprenticeship, which is 4 more years of free labor to make up the balance.
Right.
But the enslaved persons whose labor for all those centuries was used to enrich them, they got nothing. That is the basis for the reparations, for the harm and for the unpaid labor for centuries. That's the crux of it.
So our argument then is going to be backed up like with the Tilson report that you're talking about, the 10,000 pages that they have on books in record, right?
Yes, the
And
Thistlewood. Yes, so the Thistlewood Diaries.
Thistlewood Diaries. That's one piece of documentation that they can use in court to bring.
And yes, and the names of all the people who received compensation. So they got the compensation and they used it for their descendants and their persons who inherited their property.
They had a right to get that money, didn't they? Wouldn't you say that they had a right to get that money?
No, it was politics. It was really politics in terms of the British government looking out for its citizens who were the enslavers, and the political weight that they carried back in the UK and so forth.
Okay, so let me draw an analogy for you.
Yes.
All right. The law is in effect. Banks cannot sustain a certain amount of losses. The government has to give them back some money to help them to stimulate the economy and bring the banks back in good order so that they can take care of their customers, right? So I'm saying in that time when they were bailed out by England, right? That's pretty much the same thing, which means that England is acknowledging that their business was legal at the time, which is why they can pay them, they can give them money back.
No, I'm saying to you that it was a political decision. It was a political decision based on the power that the plantocracy wielded. They had a lot of power, you know, because they were moneyed people, they were rich. They made fortunes of slavery. So they could wield political power back in the UK, and they had good connections.
All right.
It was a case of too big to fail, that type of thing, you know. It was not a too big to fail. So in terms of the debt and its quantification, there was this 2014 LLB dissertation by Katrina Schwartz from the University in New Zealand, Otago in New Zealand. And what she did was that she made a computation for the retroactive money, this is retroactive payment not received. And they fixed it at the lowest level of an English field worker for 200 years, plus a sum for the loss of assets in Africa and the trauma. What would be the sum for the settlement? And the figure that was suggested, this was a team of British scholars who did this. The dissertation contained the information. So in 2005, a group of British scholars and financial experts were asked to answer the question: if Britain were asked to pay 2 million enslaved Blacks in the Caribbean a retroactive wage fixed at the lowest level of an English field worker for 200 years, plus a sum for their lost assets and the trauma inflicted, what would be the sum of the settlement?
Okay, and I'm saying,
yes.
Okay, go ahead, finish that.
This group of scholars came up with 7.5 trillion pounds. 7.5 trillion pounds.
For the 2 million slaves, for the 2 million slaves.
Yes, they use those parameters to come up with this 7.5 trillion pounds.
7.5 trillion pounds for 2 million slaves.
Yes.
But we would have had 12 million slaves who were moved.
No, we're talking about the Caribbean, you know. The 7.5 trillion is for the Caribbean. The 12 million slaves went different places. Some went to Brazil and elsewhere and so forth. Okay. So this is for the Caribbean.
Okay, so here our court work. As you say, they look at precedents, right? We are going to have to come good to get reparations based on your argument. Because if they saw, political or not, if they at the time saw the need to pay back these business owners who are enslavers,
yes,
it's on record that they've accepted responsibility for the loss of those businesses. It's the same way that if England comes out today, if the king comes out today and say, I apologize for all the bad things that we do. I'm
Yeah.
apologizing through slavery. He just would have set off millions and billions of lawsuits, not just one, millions and billions of lawsuits, just to accept that he did wrong. So they're not going to come wrong because in their estimation, they made it right by paying these enslaved owners monies for their loss. By virtue of them giving that money, they're saying, we know we did you wrong, so therefore your money. That's
So
a big case in court.
Yes, except that that is the same basis on which they have exposed themselves. Because having paid the people who benefited from the crime and didn't pay the victims, the time has come now for the victims to be paid.
I understand. From an emotional standpoint, yes,
No,
I understand. But
it's
from
not
a
emotional. As a matter of fact, if you notice, these people, these governments are coming out one by one, and they are making this baby step of apologizing because they are so ashamed. The evidence is so overwhelming of the atrocities that they committed in the past, and they were hidden. These atrocities were hidden, but they can't be hidden anymore.
I agree.
German government has apologized and saying, well, they're going to put money into a fund. Look at recently, this journalist, this Britain journalist, Trevelyan is her surname. Trevelyan is her surname. She journeyed to Barbados, made an apology and put up a sum of money for what have you, and so on and so forth.
From a person, what is she?
Her
forebears
were enslavers and had a plantation in Barbados. She retired as a BBC journalist. Her first name escaped me, but the last name is Trevelyan, and so forth. And look, you see, let me put this to you and our listeners. There was a time, you know, when persons thought that enslavement would never end. And just like how persons are saying that there will never be reparations. It's just a matter of time.
Oh, no, I'm not saying
and I may not see it in our lifetime. You and I may not see it in our lifetime, and I'm prepared to accept that. But it is eventually going to happen. The tide is cresting. The tide is rising.
Yeah,
we see different companies. Yes, we see different companies that are coming out one after the other.
Yeah.
Harvard University did a study of its ties to slavery, you know, and put up a fund afterwards. Notice that Dennis O'Brien, chairman from the Digital Group, is also onto the reparations wagon, you know, in terms of arguing for it.
So all we're waiting for then, we're waiting for a groundswell. We're waiting for a groundswell.
We're getting there. Yeah. We're getting, the momentum is building.
All right, so I think the best way out, because if it goes to court, the argument is not going to be good. The groundswell of people accepting and acknowledging the wrong is the best way to go. I agree with that wholeheartedly, because I'm telling you, bringing it to court is a hard deal. It's a very difficult deal because there's so much paperwork that says it was a legal business. And the fact that they paid them that's making it even more legal because they're paying for less.
I don't know if the fact that they paid is an argument. I think that if you say, well, then okay, it was legal on the books, blah blah blah, I can appreciate that argument. But to say the fact that the enslavers got paid is also an argument against it. I don't see that.
It's an argument that helps the position that slavery was legal. It's an argument because if it were not, they would not be arguing that. Even if it's political, they would not be putting that in parliament to make a decision. Because if it's political, they put pressure on the political system to get paid for a loss. So in order for them to have gotten a loss, it means that they were a legitimate business to be recovering losses. And so by virtue of them getting paid at that time, it is a reason to support the cause that it was a legal business. And that's those documents being in court is going to create a big problem for people who are fighting to keep their money. So the best way is this ground swelling of people going out and saying, hey, I apologize, my family apologize, and all of this. That's the best way to get this done.
Yes.
Best way.
All right. Professor Bassiani,
Mm-hmm.
Professor of International Law.
Mm-hmm.
So
UTech.
remember now, yes,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
former UTech president, professor.
Former ambassador.
Right, U.S. ambassador, Jamaica ambassador.
Jamaica ambassador, yes.
US. Right. His argument is this. On the reparations, the main question for me is whether the British state should be required to compensate the people of the Caribbean for the wrongs associated with chattel slavery. On moral grounds, this is an easy case to make. So he makes the case on the moral side of things.
Right.
He goes on now to look at the legal aspects, and he mentions that and so forth. But he also argues that modern day criminals are not allowed by courts to keep the proceeds of their crime. So the same principle should be applied and is applicable for those who were involved in the crime of slavery and enrich themselves.
All right. Is there any document out there that says slavery was a crime? I know the moral thing where we say, oh, it's a crime against human being, blah, 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 blah. But was it a crime? There was nothing there that says that it's a crime. It had to stop because of the ground swelling. It has to stop because abolitionists. It has to stop because the government said, this is, the whole idea of
economical.
Yes, right?
Yeah, and so on.
But yeah, okay. So that's what my argument is.
Again, we getting into a kind of repetitive zone because what we have here is that they did have laws. The British Parliament passed laws to legitimize slavery.
Right.
But when you look at what was being legitimized, it was just sheer horror. And looking at things now through the lens of how we're looking at them now, this is something that just cannot be defended. It cannot be defended.
Do you know that I believe that the Jim Crow laws were more horrible on a person than slavery, right? I believe that. But nobody went to prison because the laws were in place. Nobody said it was illegal. They stopped it because morally, people are starting to recognize that Black people are people, right? But there was nothing that came into play that says you committed a crime by executing the law of Jim Crow laws, and nobody went to prison because of that. So I'm saying, do you understand? Are you following me? Are you following my thoughts?
Here's where we're going. We're not going to stay in that rabbit hole.
Okay.
We're not going to stay in that rabbit hole. It's overwhelming evidence of the horrors of chattel slavery. And on account of that, and on behalf of our ancestors, we must demand compensation and repair for the harm that was done.
I was gonna push in you because I wanted
that is the argument, and we are not letting up, and we are not going to be distracted by nothing. We're going to focus on the terrible things that happened to our ancestors, and we're not going to let these people get away with it.
All right, so here's reparation. Here's a great example of reparation in place. When the United States, the whites in the United States come in and hurt, kill, and the Indians.
Yes.
And the Indians, they came, they saw, and they conquered. And they put some of them in prison, burn them, whatever it is. The same thing that they do with black people, right? It's not fully and totally executed, but over time, you hear about Indian reservations, right? So reservations now have their own economies, their own police department, their own governors, and their own this and their own systems of justice and stuff, right? Now, before, they didn't have that. They were just placed on these reservations, right? And they were given food once every 3 months, or go and look, go and kill and eat, right? That's what they, but no, there are so many programs, and I'm not saying that they are the best programs in the world, but there are programs in place to benefit the societies on the Indian reservations that are completely different from the normal, regular United States. In fact, in the federal government, you'll see particular funding and particular jobs available in Indian land and so forth, and their actual complete societies, complete economies, complete social order and stuff that's going on on those reservations. And that, to me, they have their own prisons, they have their own judges, all of this stuff. That, to me, is some level of reparation. And so if I'm not looking back and say we want the money, but I'm looking back for the in-kind support of creating a good education system, helping to create a good education, helping to create a good justice system, that kind of stuff. That's
Are you familiar with the CARICOM 10-point reparations plan in terms of what they have set out there? All right, so there's that. Also, as it really, I mentioned the 7.5 trillion pounds from the British group. The Brattle group was also a group out of the US that did some computations more recently. Justice Patrick Robinson, who sits on the International
I read
Court.
about him. Yes,
Judge Patrick is very active in the reparations movement and was instrumental in getting the Brattle group to crunch the numbers and put the numbers forward.
I saw that.
That's also there.
Yes.
So what Justice Robinson has said is that they are not advocating for a check to be cut for each person. They are looking for developmental programs.
Absolutely.
Developmental programs to address some of the areas of deficit in the society. So, for example, all of these non-communicable diseases, some of which I call slavery diseases, because hypertension, for example, is because those persons who survived the Middle Passage, I think they either retained water or something to do with the water retention thing, and then it had to do with how they eventually survived. And those who survived and had the adaptation to make that adjustment, they ended up with hypertension as a result. How the enslaved Africans were fed led them to have things like diabetes, other kind of deficiencies, and chronic diseases as a result. So some of the repair that reparations would do is to address those type of things. Our education system needs significant investments in the infrastructure and so on and so forth. These are some of the things. They are all set out there.
Okay, that's good to hear.
I would like to do. We can't do this in a 1 hour session.
I know.
And I have to say, I would like for you and our listeners to get a copy of my book. It is 400 pages of the arguments that we're making.
Tell us the name of the book
Yes.
and where we can get it. That's all you need to do. This is your show too.
I am dropping the link right here in the chat. See the link there? Right there in the chat, persons can get it. The compelling case for reparations for chattel slavery and overdue debt, which is available on Amazon. 400 pages. Where I've put the information together and make the case, the CARICOM reparations plan, all of the moral case and the legal case for reparation, the horrors of enslavement, all of those things are set out there. British history and how it has colonized 3/4 of the globe when it was in its heyday. The British Museum have African art pieces there where they are benefiting from the monies paid by tourists to visit the museum. All of those monies are going to the UK coffers, you know. And what they say, they passed a law. You're talking about slavery being legal. The British Museum has passed a law to say that anything that comes into its possession cannot be returned. What kind of law is that? A law that perpetuates thievery. That's what it is.
So like the IRS.
Yeah, anything that comes into the possession of the British Museum cannot be returned. You hear people talking about the Garden of Kew Garden in the UK. Those are germplasm that they stole from all over the world and brought into that garden.
I know, I heard about that. It
was just rampant looting of everything. They went into cities and burnt down the palaces and looted what's inside of it and so on and so forth. We can't have these people not giving an account of themselves and being brought to book.
So Paul, why is Jamaica perpetuating that type of stuff? Like to have, what did woman name street name of her? What's her name again? That woman that they have a street name of her in Kingston, and she don't like black people. What was her name again?
Lady Musgrave.
Lady Musgrave, yes. Why do we still have that?
That's a whole other thing. In the aftermath of the George Floyd matter, when we're toppling statues all over the world and so on, and they toppled the one in the UK and throw him into the river.
Right, I remember
and so forth.
Yes.
Our Minister of Culture, Babsy Grange, said that they were going to do an audit, as it were, of colonial statues that still remained in Jamaica. But then it has just died down afterwards, you know, it just died down. We do not have any will or any guts to take on these kind of things. There's a Columbus statue down in St. Anne's Bay. I drove past it the other day. Why do we have that type of thing? And I was saying, you know, somebody should take a sledgehammer to that thing.
Well, I made a comment like that on Facebook the other day, right? And they say, why should we get rid of our relics? That's a part of our history.
Yes, and so on and so forth. Also, the naming of the street names and so forth. We have schools here, you know, schools that have their history back to colonial, Monroe College and others and so forth. And those schools. Professor Ahmed Reid did a history of, for example, the Chamber of Commerce, and it went back to show who were the members of the Chamber of Commerce back in the day. And they all had links, many of them, I should say, many of them had links to slavery and that type of thing. You know, so this is, you see, I'm wondering myself.
So should we get rid of those relics, Paul? I mean, they're entrenched and embedded, into our history. How do you just
let me tell you what statues do. Statues project silent messages. They don't speak, but they speak. And what they're telling us is that they are put on a pedestal, they are being venerated. I think they're best in a museum. I think they're best placed in a museum. If in the alternative, you can't put them in a museum, at the very minimum, go and put up a billboard beside them with the truth. Go and put up a billboard beside them with the truth. But we need to remember, when they were put there, was to venerate them. So if we're going to do anything, we now have to do what they call it, truth writing. Truth, making truth right.
I like that because, I was so moved and touched. I had emotions going through this place. I'd never been through there until about 3-4 years ago. The Eros Park.
Oh,
I'd never gone to Eros Park until about 3-4 years ago. Let me tell you something. I moved from one person's statue to this. There are 9 graves.
Yes.
Including Dennis Brown and Miss Lou. That's 10, Miss Master, right? And I walked all of them. I'm gonna tell you something. I felt like I was gonna bawl, but the beauty of it was that each one that I went, there's a lot of writing about Nanny and Paul Bogle, and it was so lovely to walk through that place and feel the energy of the strength of Jamaica. It's like a backbone sitting right there.
So you see the power of imagery and symbols.
Yes. Yeah, man. Yes.
So these colonial statues that are still there, they are projecting power just the same of a negative energy.
In a negative way. Yeah.
Negative energy. And we should not be venerating them in that way. We really shouldn't. So that's another part of the equation as well. But there's no will to do it.
Let me ask you now.
There's no movement.
Why can't we, the people, come together and say, we're going to tear down that Columbus statue down our center? If it's probably, there,
this is probably the best question you asked me.
Because you're the one who told me that the moral right is better than the law. Pretty much you're saying to me, right?
Oh, yes. That is why people must protest against unjust laws.
Right. Okay. So you said that to me last week. And so the moral right is to take down the Bustamante thing, just come together and we'll beat it. But everybody afraid.
Not Bustamante.
Columbus. Everybody afraid that if them go there and do it, they will get locked up. And then I want to deal with that.
And the thing about it is that if the Sam Sharps and the Paul Bogles were afraid of getting locked up, would probably still be on the plantation now.
Absolutely.
So you see, people have to be, when they were putting Mandela on trial, he made a famous speech that he said that it is thing that he believes in, it is something that he believes in, and it is something that for which he is willing to die. That is a famous speech that he made at his trial, because he said that he realized that they were going to be convicted anyway, so he was going to use the trial to make a statement. Yes, make a statement, because it was a foregone conclusion that they were going to be convicted. So he said that these are principles that I believe in, and these are principles for which I'm prepared to actually die. The thing about it, to the question that you asked, why is there not an uproar or an uprising against this kind of thing? Our history, Leo, our history, we have not been taught these things, to look at these things in the way that they ought to be looked at. Let me give you my personal example. I remember being in school. My social studies teacher started out with Christopher Columbus, and you can hear that I can recite it for you. Christopher Columbus was born in Genoa, Italy.
I remember that too.
And I got 100% for social studies. Mr. Barker, if he sees you now, he will tell you, Paul Ivy was my best student in social studies. We are taught to venerate these things, these villains. We're taught to venerate these villains. That is how history is taught. So we have to go now to our education system.
So
that is a whole other ball game.
I hear
we are teaching our children.
Okay, so a few years ago, Florida implemented a law where students would be taught Black history. And then last year, the governor killed that and said, no, Black history teacher, the foolishness. Huh? But I heard that Canada, the province of Canada, of Toronto, no, province of Ontario. I hope I'm saying this right. Province of Ontario will be introducing Black history in schools, grades 6 through 8 and 10. 6, 7.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Part of the DeSantis thing. If you were of derivation,
yeah,
where your history was as horrible as theirs, would you want it taught? That is what is at play there. They want to hide the truth. They are ashamed. They are ashamed of their history.
Yes,
they are ashamed of their history. So it's not really Black history that they're teaching. They're hiding. It's white history they're hiding. Because it is white history that perpetuated all those atrocities.
What the Black history, what the Black history will do is show up the white history. So by taking it out. Yeah.
Exactly. I watched an interview with Stephen Sakar interviewing a Holocaust survivor. That was trying to look for the date on the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Ostrich. And she asked her, do you think it's important for your story to be told? The story of what happened to your people at Ostrich. And the woman responded without any hesitation. Oh yes, to educators, to school children, we must never forget. Yep. That's what she said, a survivor of the Jewish Holocaust, or of the Nazi Holocaust.
I understand.
Teaching it so that they will never forget. We seem to be afraid, I don't know what. That is why, for example, you see, we are tiptoeing about getting away from the British monarchy. There is some residual fear or something of the sort that is preventing us from boldly making the bold step. And we don't teach history in the manner that we should. We just don't. And that is why I'm trying to fill the gap with some of the books that I'm writing, including this one, and including my Garvey book, and so on and so forth.
Well, it's there about time. We've been here for an hour and a half. It's been really great talking to you about these things. Man, I enjoy these kind of discussions. And Paul, I'm telling you, you're full of history. I enjoy just listening to you, referring to your books, and bringing the facts out for us to just ventilate. I enjoy that.
Thank you, Leo. I've taken the time. I'm an educator, and I'm using a bigger stage now to do my education, as it were, since I'm no longer in classrooms. And I thank you for the opportunity to have this interaction. The questions that you asked me push me deep into my reservoir to articulate particular positions and so forth, and then even bring out any knowledge gaps that I think I may have. I go and fill them in and so forth. It's a learning process for me as well.
Respect.
For me. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, man. I will see you again next week. Okay.
Catch you next week. Take care.
All right, everybody. Bye-bye.